This is a How Does Your Garden Grow presentation. Raj, I just can't thank you enough. You know how much I care about you, so thank you. So I started out in life not far from here in a little town called Ligonier, Pennsylvania, where I was mostly interested in twirling batons and figuring out how to curl my hair. I also was making a very serious study of the piano, and I was on track to becoming a concert pianist. But some things happened in my family, and I ended up here at Carnegie Mellon as an undergraduate in 1980. This is from a football. I was really into football and marching bands and things like that. And I wanted to point out to you that we used to be hyphenating Carnegie Mellon all the time. We no longer hyphenate. And the logo used to look like something out of a science fiction movie. So things have changed since then too. I was an undergraduate here, and when I was 18 years old, I started working for Mark Fox, who was one of the founders of the Robotics Institute, was mentored by Raj Reddy, and Mark and Raj had just renovated the upstairs far corner of Doherty Hall, which Jean Harpley will tell you was hard to get to because she had to carry boxes up a set of stairs. There wasn't even an elevator to get up there. And so during the undergraduate years when I was studying music and changing my major a million times from economics to psychology to physics to whatever, the one consistent thing was that I was working with Mark and his team and learning all about computing and how it applied. We were doing symbolic AI and we were applying it in manufacturing contexts, and it was a really, really great time. And so when Raj and Mark and Jaime Carbonell and Phil started the Carnegie Group, I was maybe the first engineer hired, maybe one of the first engineers hired. I ended up going to California, working with a whole bunch of corporate clients, Boeing Commercial Aircraft, TRW. I did a whole bunch of knowledge craft implementations in industrial contexts, which turned out to be a big theme for me in my career. Then the Robotics Institute decided it was going to start a PhD program, and I got a call saying, hey, you should apply. And I came back, and Mark Fox was my PhD advisor for 2 years. He doesn't remember that he was my advisor for 2 years. He doesn't remember the conversation where he came up to me and said, I'm going to Toronto. Do you want to come with me or do you want to stay? And I went back and forth on it for 3 or 4 weeks, and I decided to switch to Raj Reddy as my advisor. And so that's how I ended up here.
Good choice.
I don't know. I have been trying to immigrate to Canada for many years. It's very difficult given that I don't have a Canadian passport. I have sometimes regretted that decision, Mark.
Very particular of this.
Yeah. So I got introduced to Raj. This is more or less what Raj looked like the year I started being his graduate student. And he's been a huge influence on my life in so many ways. But Raj is kind of a busy guy. So he said, hey, really, the two people you should be working with are Roni and Wayne. And so I ended up being co-advised by all three of them through the 8 years that it took me to get my PhD. One of the main things that Roni and Wayne had me do was read this guy's code from top to bottom. There was a lot of it. It was incredibly difficult for me to understand everything in it. And also Han, I had to read a lot of your code too. And so I needed a lot of help. So Eric Thayer, this is actually what he looked like when we were working together first. He's now a grandfather.
Wow.
And Ravi Moser, who mysteriously never changes in appearance. He was a mature man when I met him, and he's still a good-looking mature man today. They were my favorite people. I just hung out in their office in Science Hall, then Wien Hall, getting a ton of help in climbing through Kai-Fu's and Han's code, trying to understand what was going on and figuring out what could I do to try to make it a little better. And I also had a wonderful, wonderful office mate whose name was Meiyu Wang Meiyu, and she was just my saving grace. The two of us were pretty much the only women in the environment at the time, and mysteriously both were advised by Raj, who was the original diversity, equity, and inclusion guy in this place. I also worked with Mike Phillips, who later on became founder of Speechworks. And also, later on, two of Alex Weibel's graduate students, Torsten Zepfenfeld and Michael Finke, who really helped me come up with a chunk of the theory that went into my PhD about confidence annotation, which was all the rage for 15 or 20 years until deep learning came in, and then nobody cares anymore because the fundamental techniques were not necessary anymore. Then a bunch of tech industry things happened, and I don't want to bore you with all the slides. I went to LIMSI, I did a 2-year postdoc there on a fancy NATO NSF postdoc that Catherine Kapitas helped me get with Raj's help, of course. And then I founded the European division of Speechworks International, which was the company Mike Phillips founded, which then later got absorbed by Nuance, like so many companies did. Then I got recruited by Paul Taylor to come help him do stuff at Rhetorical, which was in Scotland. And during all that time, I met Yoon Kim, who later on became the leader of the Siri engineering group at Apple. And he raised a bunch of money in Korea, and we started a company together in California called NeoSpeech. We sold that company, and after that happened, I went to Accenture because I got recruited by Anatol Gershman, who is someone Raj introduced me to while I was in graduate school. Anatol's now here, and he retired from Accenture like many people do quite young, and now he's here as a faculty member. And then Yoon tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're coming back to me, I'm going to SK Telecom." But during all of that time, and this is one of the main messages I want to get across, all of that tech industry stuff was happening. It was fabulous. It was a really great experience. I got to move all around the world, Europe, Asia, everywhere. But I was also still being a musician and experimenting with my hair a lot. The kind of diversity that's important in our environments is not just gender, race, socioeconomic background. It's also, there are many, many of us who are also artists. Many. And Alex Weibel's artistry was skydiving and flying helicopters. So I know that you would prefer that we, but some of us come in really needing to be a lot in terms of who we are in the world. Then I went back to, I want to tell you about 2 other artists. This is Nina Zumel, whom I met here. She was a graduate student in computer science at the same time that I was here. She is the data scientist's data scientist. She writes the blog. She wrote the book about how to do data science in R. She's a very famous data scientist. She's also a professional dancer. And she lives in California. She's married to John Mount, who also got his PhD here. We're all here at pretty much the same time. And she and John run a very famous data science consultancy. And Nina dances about half-time in a dance company called Dola Rhythms, and it's an Indian dance company. Nina is not Indian. She is from the Philippines. Well, her family is from the Philippines originally. She was born here. But she looks Indian enough that she gets away with it. And she's an incredible dancer. This is Daphna Talmor. She was also here as a PhD student in computer science. She worked with Gary Miller. She's from Israel. She's an incredibly brilliant theorist and possibly the best C++ programmer I know. She was responsible for Intel's software development line that allows the Intel chip designers to then do value engineering as they're moving into manufacturing. So she's almost single-handedly responsible for making it feasible for Intel to manufacture high-quality chips at a low cost. She's also a painter. These are her oil landscapes, and these are some of her multimedia portraits. She's incredible. She's also married to another PhD from Carnegie Mellon, Jim Sticknott. They live in California. Then more cool tech industry stuff happened. I went to Korea and worked with Yoon Kim for a while. And then I got recruited by this guy, Jonathan Hardwick, who was also a PhD student here at Carnegie Mellon, to come to Minnesota State and to run what we believe to be the only entirely project-based undergraduate program in computer science in North America. I'm now the director of this program, and Nina and Daphna both teach in this program now. Last thing, I also still am very much into music. I run a record label recording studio and performance space in Amboy, Minnesota. There's a big concert happening on November 12th, because although I came here as a 17-year-old, I'm now turning 60. So I invite you all to come.